Welcome to theCUBE. My name is Lisa Marrone. I'm the Director of Business Development for the town of Chelmsford. We're back with another episode, and we've chosen this particular episode as a special note to, I guess, make a moment of history here with the state lifting the emergency restrictions, and state of emergency is ending today. And I'm back with my special group and my co-hosts, and as I call them, my friends, Jen, Franky, and Karen. Thank you, ladies, for joining me back. Looking forward to the discussion. I know that we have talked a little bit about this show, the creation of it, the purpose, the experience of it for all of us for different reasons, but I really appreciate all of you in the quick response when we came up with this thought through Chelmsford Telemedia, Franky as a guest on one of the very early episodes as we all learned how to manage our work life during a pandemic and understand the effects of COVID and so many other things that have happened. We've just kind of talked about, Karen kind of put out some stats a few moments ago. So why don't we maybe chat with Franky on her introduction and what she does to help businesses in particular through the pandemic. And then we'll hear from Karen on some of the stats that she's been following and pretty interesting stuff. And we'll just continue the discussion from there. So Franky?
Well, it's nice to be here. I think I was on the first or second one, actually. Yeah. And it's crazy because you were just mentioning how many days has it been total? 400 and something? You just mentioned that?
Karen,
462 days.
Yeah, 462 days. And it's felt like it. But that also felt like it's like a blink of the eye. So, as you know, I run the Entrepreneurship Center at Community Teamwork. And Lisa, you and I work together. I just had a conversation with Jen about trying to find ways, creative, innovative ways to help small business that don't burden them. And that's, I think, the balance that's really hard because there's a lot of money coming from the state and there's a lot of resources coming from cities and towns. And sometimes they're well coordinated and sometimes they're not. And so we end up trying to go out and help businesses. And so we're trying to now think about is how do we continue to offer support to businesses without overly burdening them so that they can stay focused on running their business and not have to divert all their energy to filling out our forms and to receive grant money, et cetera. So we're headquartered in downtown Lowell, but our program serves all of Middlesex and Essex County because we're an SBA microlender. And we also provide technical assistance, which is the service way of saying small business coaching. And currently we have several programs. So we have a STAT program, which is great. We pay consultants to go into businesses and help them in the areas of marketing, finance, wellness, and operations support. We also have that microloan, which qualifies for the SBA debt relief program until September, which is pretty cool. So current and new borrowers can still have the SBA pay their principal and interest for loans that close before the end of September. And we also just heard that we received a resiliency grant from Mass Growth Capital. So we're going to have $150,000 worth of small business grants. We just found out Friday, which is great. And we are also building a content development studio in Lowell. It's going to be available to anyone who works with us for free. And we are also taking on the farmers market. And I'm hoping to work with you, Lisa and Jen, to see how we can improve local food production outcomes and get healthy food to our constituents. That's it. That's all we do.
I think with all of that, it's obvious why we're all connected with Franky, right? I mean, what an extraordinary list of programs. And I think a lot of those were already in place before the pandemic, right? And then many of them kind of transitioned and changed and the infusion of cash. And we were trying to catch up with each other constantly.
Always. Well, one of the things that has been, I think, a silver lining or gold lining, whatever you like, to the pandemic, at least for small business, is all that we were trying to do with 1.5 staff or 2 staff. And now we're looking at bringing on our 7th person. So at least the energy of the funders is being focused, I think, in the right direction, kind of at the right quantity of funding at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel that, as the COVID restrictions are lifted, businesses are trying to stabilize and figure out the best way forward. And more so, small businesses need a lot of guidance, and they call me very confused at times. What's allowed, what's not allowed, where are the programs, where are the grants, how do I apply? And it's been a very busy time. It's like, I can't believe it's been 460 something days already. But let me see if, I know Jen has been talking with you more so about other topics that, as we know, overlap with all of the work that we do, but maybe with the lifting of the state emergency, let's hear from Jen on how she'll be using some of your services, Franky, in your programs going forward, and how just the work we do together, just continues on.
Yeah, Lisa, it's kind of funny to think about the lifting of the state of emergency, because in my line of work, in social work, it feels like that's really only sort of a symbolic saying, because the fact remains that there are so many individuals and families, and I'm sure businesses as well, that find themselves really still living in a state of emergency right now as a result of this pandemic. And, Franky's right when she talks about the amount of funding that's become available and been made available for so many different types of programs. And I just got word just yesterday about some new funding that has been made available that are going to help, hopefully, some folks that I work with. It kind of comes on the tails of the fuel assistance program, where funding has been made available for folks who have fallen behind on their water bills. It's specifically for water bills. And I mean, it's so new that when I brought it up in a task force meeting yesterday where CTI was present, CTI the representative there didn't even know about it. So the money was released, from the feds to the state, but has not been dispersed to local communities yet. So, it is coming, and there's more relief coming for people. And I think that even in spite of the fact that the state of emergency is lifting today, people and businesses are still going to need a lot of help. And so that's where, we transition out of, the quarantine that we've been in and into, remaining full force in our positions of helping people connect to the resources that they need.
Yeah.
So Karen, do you have any thoughts about, as a small business owner, your perspective is always kind of interesting and the reasons why we connect and overlap, but any feedback on how this pandemic has been for your small businesses? And do you feel like the programs, whether you use them or not, do you think that they were effective and helpful for the economy overall, for all types of small business, and maybe not just small business, but just stabilizing the economy in the area, the small economy?
So my small business was actually an essential business, and so we were open the entire time. But I will say that the government funding programs, although they were disorganized as they were rolled out and the rules were constantly changing, I think the bottom line is that they really help people. For us, for Visiting Angels and senior home care, we were able to apply for the PPP loans that are being forgiven, and we were able to pay our home health aides that go into seniors' homes. We were able to pay them heroes pay, which they really deserve because they were on the front line. When the quarantine was set and everybody was locked into their homes and masked and not going out and there was no traffic, our caregivers were still out there. There's so many frontline heroes that still were working during this time. And so we were able to to help our caregivers who were still out there and were struggling because schools were shut down and there was no daycare. So yes, these programs, I think, really, really help the people that need it. I think that every industry has their own complications with applying for it and getting forgiveness. And I think that the state of emergency being lifted now is really going to help those businesses that had a more difficult time taking advantage of programs, with restaurants being able to open.
I think we lost Karen.
Yeah.
Restaurants can get more people.
Aaron, you froze for a second.
I froze for a second, Karen, but no, thank you.
I was talking about food. I shouldn't have frozen during food. I was just talking about how with the state of emergency lifted and all the restrictions gone, I'm hoping that it's going to really help other small businesses. For example, with restaurants, their outdoor seating was able to expand during the time they could only seat outdoors, and now they can open up their indoors, and hopefully people will still be open to supporting small businesses and going out there and supporting your local restaurant and store.
Yeah. I know Franky and I spoke a lot about how so much adaptation, small businesses had to figure out how to operate online only, curbside pickup, order online, all of these things. And many were caught off guard. And we've talked often about how to bring in more support and training and resources for technology.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional comments on that, Franky, of the discussions we've had over the months of how we can really create a strong, positive change in the right direction?
Yeah, well, actually, it's a perfect segue, because launching tomorrow, I think the governor's going to announce it tomorrow, is and maybe it was already announced, but the Mass Growth Capital organization that has been managing a lot of the statewide funding grants is going to be announcing a digital divide support program where they will provide up to $5,000 grants to small businesses specifically to help with mitigating inequality in technology utilization. So the complicated thing about that is that the business actually has to be sponsored by an organization that's funded by Mass Growth Capital, like my organization. And so it puts, it puts more effort on our end to try to serve all of the volume of need, but the process will look like us helping to identify and hopefully having referrals of businesses come to us. Then we need to help them complete a digital assessment, which I haven't seen the full thing yet, but it's probably a lot of work, like all of them. And then and then there has to be kind of a programmatic design of how that work or that inequality is going to be addressed through the hiring of a consultant to do the work, whether that's website design or moving financial records online or building an app, whatever that looks like. So then a third-party contractor will have to get involved, and then we will need to sponsor that, or another organization. Locally, it's myself. We're Mass Growth Capital funded organizations at the Entrepreneurship Center. E4All, all that's in Lowell as well. CMAA, Cambodia Mutual Assistance Association, and then Lowell Plan, although I don't know if they're doing that, but we are the ones in this area that can make referrals and sponsorships. So the challenge with that, and I hope you all send us people, and I might have to say, maybe I'll have to get some information about that before I start getting crazy amounts of emails. But just one of the limitations with this program, which I understand the purpose of it, and I hope that we can easily work around it, but the business needs to produce 20% of the fee for that person, for that consulting work. We're trying to find, see if we can use some of our grant money for those businesses who just can't access that 20%. Mm-hmm. And the organization who sponsors is allowed to request basically a fee for their time. So that's one of the solutions. There's another one coming down, which may be announced this week or next week, called Biz Empower. And that is, again, through Mass Growth Capital. And they're going to match funds raised through crowdfunding. And of course, those people who have the least access to technology are probably going to be the least prepared to build crowdfunding campaigns. So we're going to try to support with that as well. So those are two things, and I'm just more ideas, always trying to figure out how to make these problems go away, make them smaller.
I feel as we're all listening to Franky, she's an all-in businesswoman, and she just goes forward with no fear. And I try to stay close with Franky. She's an excellent resource in obviously so many ways, and just a great teammate in the things we've done together.
Thank you. I have to just make sure that I say I have a great staff. I look good on the screen, hopefully, but my staff, they really are
the work you do. Before we run out of time, any last thoughts, Jen or Karen?
I do. I'm curious. So, Franky, you bring up a great point about how the pandemic has sort of highlighted inequities in technology for businesses, and I think that this is one of those silver linings that we're seeing coming out of the pandemic is some programs and assistance to help businesses address those inequities. So I just think that's a terrific thing. I'm curious to learn, I guess, from everybody here, how, if at all, the lifting of the state of emergency might affect your work. I mean, for me, I feel like it's business as usual. I mean, all four of us, I think, were incredibly busy throughout this pandemic. We had to shift the way that we did things in certain ways, but I don't think that we were any less busy because of the pandemic. I mean, with Lisa and Franky, working on the business end of things, and Karen's business providing essential services to folks during the pandemic, and then with me assisting, individuals and families. I mean, none of us really have had much for downtime. I'm just curious if you feel like that this lifting of the state of emergency is going to change anything for anybody here. I know for me, I don't see a slowing down in sight.
Where do I start with that? I feel like my entire job has changed entirely. I honestly, and just to be brutally honest, I remember just being in tears. Like, how am I going to do this? I felt like it was me saving the business community. Obviously, large businesses can survive a stronger hit, but how are these small businesses going to make it? And we're just doing it one at a time. And I know I have sent countless numbers to Franky's resources. She is a regional agency. She serves many communities. But we also need to talk with her often because there's so much changing, and there's still more programs coming out for recovery. The town has ARPA money to work with. There is just so much more to be done. And I think we got to do it through teamwork. Otherwise, it's just overwhelming, and we just continue to work closely. I know that Franky has to drop off real soon, and I think the three of us can continue to talk a little bit, but Franky's in demand, and we all know why. And so just
Let me answer that question.
Okay.
So I'll just make it simple. I have 300 hours of unused PTO.
Take time off. You better get that scheduled.
So you're taking a great big vacation, right, Franky?
I actually have to take a week off next week, or it all goes away. But yeah. I think that the workload might change a little bit, but I think it is going to get heavier because of all the funding. And I don't know if you've noticed about funding, but they typically want the funding spent in the same amount of time, regardless of when I got a grant in March that I had to spend down by June. so that can be a lot of pressure. But honestly, what I think is going to happen is we're going to see a lot of businesses that are going to recover fairly quickly because they're going to open their doors, and all of the customer loyalty that they had is going to support them through recovery. But I think we're going to see a lot of businesses that have been holding off to just see what happens. And this is going to be the real test of whether they're going to be able to survive or not. And so with those businesses, if they really struggle, there might be bank loans and mortgages and properties and a whole bunch of other kind of collateral damage work around that. So I think we may be changing out of emergency mode into stabilization and then towards helping people grow back their old previous business. But that's what I think we're going to be spending our time on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry I have to go.
I know. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, Franky.
Thanks,
We'll
Franky.
chat soon.
Okay. So I know, I'm just going to kind of jump right back in because I know Jen and I have been with Franky regarding the food insecurity things, which also relates to Karen's client list and serving the mature population in the area. But, you know, continuing on with talking about Franky's programs, if Jen could just share a little bit more about some of those exciting discussions about food insecurity and how that will look, because I'm not sure it got the same attention prior to COVID. There was always a need for food. There's always a need to provide those basic elements, you know, humanitarian services of clothing, shelter, food. But it really came very strong and obvious during the times of the pandemic. And now that we're coming out of that and the state of emergency is over, some of these programs are just, they're here to stay, and they're getting more enforcement and more funding.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, certainly there's been food insecurity has existed in Chelmsford long before I even got here and took this position. It was access to healthy foods was a priority that was identified among Chelmsford residents in the last Greater Lowell Health Alliance community needs assessment. And so people know that it's a priority, but the pandemic really heightened that and heightened not just increased the need for assistance with food, but also increased awareness in the public around food insecurity, because all of a sudden, you know, folks who were not food insecure before the pandemic, a lot of them became food insecure because of losing jobs or, you know, getting laid off and things like that. So, you know, I think our state and our communities did a really good job of addressing that in the moment. You know, schools continued to provide lunches for students, and the state instituted a pandemic EBT program so that any family that had school-age children got SNAP monies, even if they didn't previously qualify for SNAP benefits. So I think those are good things. What I see happening, you know, coming up is where all of the state of emergency is being lifted, that's going to reduce the number of those programs. And there are families and individuals that are still dependent on those programs. So, you know, last summer, so many communities and so many schools were, or last spring and into the summer, so many communities were giving out food, you know, to just with no income eligibility requirements or anything. It was just, if you need food, come get it. And I think we're going to start to go back to some of those income eligibility requirements in some spaces. And that may eliminate some people who on paper it looks like they should be okay, but in reality they may not. So that's sort of something. I'm going to be very vague about, you know, what you and I and Franky spoke about, because there's nothing definite, but that's sort of something that is, you know, that where we're looking at continuing to address food insecurity, not just for the folks that on paper we know need it, but folks who may have other needs that we don't know about. And it's you sort of have my wheel spinning here with Karen too, because where she's, you know, her business has a pulse on a real niche population of folks who may have needs that my office isn't aware of, that Karen, I'm wondering if you and I need to connect offline about this and figure out, you know, how my office can maybe help out some of your clients in ways that are maybe a little bit non-traditional, you know?
Yeah, that would be great. I just think that maybe our takeaway, to summarize our 28th episode, I just, you know, even though today's the official end of the state of emergency, I think that the pandemic brought a lot of awareness to what's going on sort of deep down in people's lives. And I agree with you, Jen. I think that the food insecurity is going to stay, but I think that people have gotten very creative during the pandemic to figure out ways to help people. And with businesses opening up, hopefully people will be able to find employment and be able to, help themselves while still receiving support from the state and from the town. And it's great that the town of Chelmsford has you guys as a resource. This is probably our last episode under the queue for the quarantine. And now we're really all about the questions of how to make the town of Chelmsford a better place. Over the 28 episodes, we've talked about businesses like health clubs and coffee shops and ice cream shops and insurance agencies, and even a pharmacy that is now has vaccines for anybody that wants one, whenever they want one, whichever kind of vaccine they want. We've really covered a lot of topics here, and hopefully it has helped people in the town of Chelmsford. And we're still going to be here answering the questions. And I'm glad to hear from Franky that there's other programs out there that continue to support businesses and people through the transition from the pandemic era to the post-pandemic era. And thanks, guys. This has been awesome.
It has been great. Real quick, does anybody have a favorite episode? I might have to pick the pickleball episode.
Really?
And, right up there with any of the tastings that we did.
I was going to go for maybe the cupcakes, or I don't know, but you know what I think? We gotta go on the road. We need to take this show on the road, and we got to get out into the community, and just really start to connect and I don't know. I think we need to have a road show at some point. But before we end this episode, I got to take a little poll here. How many of us have done a Zoom call, maybe wearing our slippers or half dressed in PJs at the end of the day or something? How many of us have done that?
I mean, how many have done a Q episode like that? Especially in the early days when we were all locked in our houses.
No, my favorite episode was the health club episode where we got to see Jen working out. That was
oh yeah, right.
I don't know. I liked the episode from the treehouse, Karen, or when you were trying to get to the treehouse.
We began with isolation. Our first show was about isolation, and now let's all get together very soon.
Yes. We will.
Absolutely.
And at one point, the producer of the show has to come on, and maybe it's going to be on the next show. The producer has to actually participate. So thank you, Chelmsford Telemedia, for allowing us to make this show happen, and just enabling our ability to communicate far and wide with the community and beyond. Otherwise, I'm not sure we would have been able to do it. So thank you, Pete Padula, Chelmsford Telemedia. Thank you to my hosts. You guys are just so fun.
And thank you to you because this was your brainchild. So
it's great. And we're just going to keep we're going to do more things, different things. It's going to be great. And we're going to stay connected. So thank you so much, you guys.